We shall commence this module by understanding the relationship between agriculture and economic development. Agriculture is one of the very important factors in economic development of a country. Agriculture has also been one of the oldest and very significant means of livelihood in an economy. Ha-Joon Chang in 2009 in his article Rethinking Public Policy in Agriculture, Lessons from History, Distant and Recent, published in the Journal of Peasant Studies, clearly shows that most of the European countries which are in the league of developed nations now had more than 50% of the total employment originating in the agricultural sector at the beginning of industrialization. The role of agriculture in economic development can be identified mainly through two aspects, supply and demand in the economy. The role of supply of agriculture sector in an economy has been witnessed based on the labor and raw material requirements in the industrial production. During the earlier stage of industrial expansion, most of the economies in the world have been characterized by larger percentage of population residing in rural areas and engaged in agricultural activities. The agriculture sector supplies the labor to the industrial sector in the urban areas. But this is possible only when the agriculture sector is characterized by the surplus supply of labor. The surplus supply of labor is generated by the introduction of technology in the agricultural activities or by the situation which is characterized by zero or negative marginal productivity of labor. The expansion of industrial workers due to expansion of industrial activities requires food grains for ensuring that these workers remain in physically working conditions. Agriculture sector is the only source that supplies food grains to meet the consumption requirements of industrial workers. Agriculture sector also supplies the inputs in the form of raw materials to certain industries for their production of certain goods such as textiles, beverages, foods, tobacco, rubber, chemicals, etc. Agriculture sector not only functions as the source of supply to the industrial sector, but it also functions as the source of demand for industrial sector. After studying this module, you shall be able to know the role of agriculture in economic development, the role of cropping pattern in agricultural development, significance of agricultural development in advanced economies, Indian experience with agricultural development and the role of green revolution in it, deficiency in the cropping pattern and its role in agricultural development in India, future scope and challenges in Indian agriculture. Moving on to discuss the relevance of cropping pattern in agriculture, cropping pattern highlights the degree of extensive and intensive farming. This also highlights the diversified pattern of crops produced considering the needs of the economy. The cropping pattern has two important roles. Firstly, if the existing cropping pattern is able to meet the domestic demand for different food items and therefore ensures the balanced diet of households in the economy, and secondly, if the cropping pattern is sustainable in the long run, keeping in mind the limited water resources and erodible fertility of land. Both have got considerable implications for the economic development. The first one emphasizes the role of agriculture in meeting the demand in the economy. It ensures development of an economy by meeting the demand with the sufficient production of different food items, keeping in mind the need of balanced diets as well as concern for reducing the dependence on the foreign countries. The second one emphasizes on the role agriculture in sustainable supply of food products. The cropping pattern in agriculture sector is structured by the prevailing market incentive, climatic setup and the intervention of the government. Let us now discuss the experience at international level with respect to the role of agriculture in economic development. The need to share the international experience is important to understand the contribution of agriculture sector in economic development. The most important international example would be that of Japan, which experienced tremendous contribution of agriculture sector in its economic transformation. The index of net real income produced by the agricultural sector in Japan increased from 100 for the period of 1881-90 to 239 for the period of 1931-40 according to Johansson 1962. The 6 major crops which accounted for 60% of agricultural product and 80% of food calories produced in Japan witnessed the doubling of their production over the period of 6 decades. Such doubling of production was on account of area increased by 18% and rise of yields by 66%. Now, we will understand the trend of cropping pattern in Indian agriculture, its determinants and implication. India has been a country with varying climatic conditions and diverse agricultural potentialities. Before independence, the agriculture sector grew almost at negative rate during the last 4 decades. The revitalization of agriculture sector was an imperative step to provide economic fillip to the economy and also to secure food security for the Indian population. This was important as at the time of independence, the contribution of the agricultural sector was close to 50% in the national income and more than 70% workforce was dependent on the agricultural sector. The net availability of agriculture sector was 52.4 million tons in 1950-51 for the food grains. 9% of this net availability of food grains was imported from outside. The amount of expenditure on imports of food grains was 20% of export earning. The dependency of the country on import of food grains continued till late 1960s. In 1966, the food grains imported from outside was 16%. The famous PL 480 agreement signed between India and USA in 1964 was to provide import of 6.9 million tons food grains, which consisted rice, wheat, soya beans and maize. Rice import agreement was also signed by India with Burma, Thailand, Cambodia and Pakistan. Such situation was really a serious concern for the betterment of Indian population. The import of wheat, rice, soya beans and maize was important as the cropping pattern prevailing at that time was unable to meet the essential nutritional requirements of such food grains in India. The onset of Green Revolution in 1966 was meant to improve the land productivity with the introduction of improved seeds, better fertilizers, new technologies and scientific cropping patterns. As per an estimate, the area under high yield varieties seeds of wheat and rice increased from 10,000 hectares in 1965-66 to 3 crore hectares in 1977-78. The advantage of HYV seeds for better economic returns has been shown by Parker in 1972, who calculated the ratio of average yields of HYV to traditional varieties for different crops and found out that for wheat, rice, sorghum and maize the ratio was 3.7, 2.3, 2.5 and 2 respectively. The availability of HYV seeds became an important factor to determine the cropping pattern in India since 1966. The more detailed study by G.S. Bhalla and Gurmail Singh in 2009 on the cropping pattern in India since 1962 and its implications for the economic development is important to bring for discussion here. They have divided the period between 1962 and 2006 into 3 sub-periods. First, the initial period of Green Revolution from 1962-65 to 1980-83. Second, maturing of Green Revolution from 1980-83 to 1990-93. And third, the post-liberalization period that started from 1990-93 to 2003 and 6. They found out that mainly the northwestern states, particularly Punjab and Haryana, experienced higher agricultural growth rates during the initial period of Green Revolution. Based on the value of output of 44 crops, Punjab and Haryana were the fastest growing states between 2 trienniums of 1962-65 and 1980-83, as both grew at 5.58% and 3.74% per annum respectively. The northwestern region scored average annual growth of 3.39% over this period, which was higher as compared to any other region. The region which scored the least annual growth rate was the eastern region, which consisted mainly of Assam, Bihar, Orissa and West Bengal. Such variations in the average growth rate needs to be understood in the light of effective implementation of Green Revolution techniques. The HYV seeds mainly confined to wheat and rice, and this led to the increase in the share of such crops in the states which availed the benefits of Green Revolution. It was observed that the share of rice and wheat in northwestern regions increased from 12.8% and 15.3% respectively in 1962-65 to 19.4% and 34.4% respectively in 1980-83. Punjab witnessed the maximum change in its share of wheat from 30.8% in 1962-65 to 44.1% in 1980-83. According to Bhalla and Singh in their study in 2009. Bhalla and Singh in 2009 analyzed the performance of different regions in terms of agricultural growth and cropping pattern for the period between 1980-83 and 1990-93 also, which they termed it as maturing of the Green Revolution period. This appears that all the regions witnessed more than 3% of average growth rate. Such performance of agriculture sector had positive implications for overall prosperity of India, as the large scale population depended on agriculture. Better performance of agriculture sector in the most populated states such as Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and West Bengal, etc. affected the people positively. The poverty during this period, as per the Planning Commission's estimate, declined from 44.5% in 1983 to 36% in 1993-94. This was also the period when the Indian economy's GDP growth touched the mark of an average of around 6% per annum, and thereafter mentioned above the mark of the Hindu growth rate. Better performance of agriculture sector can be attributed to the emphasis of agriculture oriented policies of the government of India. With the expansion of the Green Revolution techniques across areas and ingredients of Green Revolution's measures accompanied by minimum support price facilities available to only few crops. The rise of agricultural sector growth rate between 1980-83 and 1990-93 was primarily due to the rise in land productivity, as the data shows that almost all the regions witnessed higher annual growth rate of crop yield. This is the truer in case of the northwestern and eastern regions, where the average net sown area declined in absolute terms. The factors which affected this better performance of agriculture sector were increasing use of technologies, changing cropping patterns, increasing use of fertilizers, and the growth in irrigated areas. The use of tractors, harvesters and pump sets was observed across all the regions. For example, the use of tractors per 10,000 hectares increased from 118 in 1980-83 to 274 in 1990-93 in the northwestern region. Similarly, there was also a jump in the use of pump sets and fertilizers as well. The rise in the use of tractors, pump sets and fertilizers was also witnessed across the other regions as well as, but the degree of rise was less. The rise of land productivity in the northwestern region and the eastern region was primarily due to the rise in the crop intensity, as the crop intensity increased by almost 10 in both the regions between 1980-83 and 1990-93. Such crop intensity was the result of implementation of Green Revolution technologies. The other regions witnessed better agricultural growth rates due to the rise in the net sown area as well as the rise in the land productivity between these two trienniums. The change in the cropping intensity was accompanied by major change in the cropping pattern. At the all India level, the share of food grains declined from 73% in 1980-83 to 68.9% in 1990-93. But such decline was primarily due to the decline in the production of coarse cereals. There was a rise in the share of non-food grain crops such as oilseeds, cotton, sugarcane and fruits and vegetables due to the introduction of technologies as part of Green Revolution. In the northwestern region, the share of wheat and rice remained unchanged, but the fiber crops, cotton crops and the vegetables and fruits remained increased marginally on the cost of pulses and coarse cereals. The eastern region also experienced similar to the northwestern regions, except that it did not witness a rise in the share of fiber crops and cotton crops, but it witnessed sharp rise in the share of fruits and vegetables. The central region witnessed a sharp rise in the share of oilseeds, while the share of wheat and rice remained almost constant, but the share of coarse cereals and pulses declined over this reference period. As far as the cropping pattern in the southern region is concerned, the share of food grains including rice and wheat declined very sharply over the period of 1980-83 to 1990-93 in favor of rising share of oilseeds, fibers, cotton, cardamom and spices and other plantation. The period of economic liberalization has been an important phase in the Indian economy, as it has brought greater degree of market elements in the agricultural sector. There has been rise in the cropping intensity across all the regions between 1992 and 2003. This has been an outcome of rise in the use of technology, fertilizers and greater use of HYV seeds. But the crop diversification grew at the slower rate than the rate that was observed during the pre-liberalization period. Hence, the economic liberalization has not worked as per the expectations of the policy makers. The slow growth rate of agricultural sector during the period between 1990-93 and 2003 and 6, across all the regions except the central region has been an outcome of such slow diversification as well as declining government spendings in the agricultural sector. The yield rates have been very low during the economic liberalization period across all the regions except the central region. The central region's better performance of agricultural growth can be attributed to the rise in the share of non-food grain items almost by 10% on the cost of food grains share. Such non-food grain items consist of oilseeds, fibers and cotton primarily. This implies the role of changing cropping pattern on the growth rate of agricultural sector in the central region. The average crop yields growth rate in the central region was at 2.62% per annum, which was higher than other regions, but it was not higher than its own performance during the pre-liberalization period. The slowdown of agricultural sector's performance during the economic liberalization period can also be attributed to the deceleration of the yield rates of important crops such as wheat and rice. The slowdown of crop diversification during the post-economic liberalization can be attributed to also the fact that majority of farmers have small land holdings, and for them the food security is an important concern, particularly during the period which has been characterized by the rising food prices. The slow down agricultural growth also needs to be attributed to the factors that even now 55% of the cropping areas are rain-fed areas, limited the potentialities of the agricultural sector. Now, we will discuss the deficiencies of the cropping pattern and its implications. The agricultural sector did improve during the post-independence period in India and also made the Indian economy self-reliant in terms of its food requirements. The total food grain stock of wheat and rice with the Food Corporation of India has gone to 71.7 million tons on 1st December 2012. Such stock is very well enough above the buffer stock norms of 20 million tons. Such stock norms are mainly meant for public distribution system as well as other welfare schemes. Second, for ensuring the food security during the bad agricultural years, and third, the stabilizing prices during the period of production shortfall through open market operations. These objectives are also important parameters for the economic development, which is defined as well-being of every individual in the society. However, the emergence of agriculture in India and its cropping pattern are characterized by few deficiencies which are discussed below. A. Emergence of unsuitable cropping pattern. The wheat-rice cropping pattern has emerged as major cropping pattern in India since the Green Revolution. Data available from the period since 1962 shows that in the northwestern region, the share of wheat and rice went up from 28.1% of the total outputs of crops during 1962-65 to 57.5% during 2003 and 6. Punjab witnessed 74% of its total output of crops coming from wheat and rice. Share of rice in Punjab was 35.5% of the total output of crops. The eastern region witnessed stagnation of share of rice and wheat since implementation of Green Revolution, and it remained around 55%. Rather, the share of rice declined from 55.8% of the total output of crops during 1962-65 to 49.5% during 2003 and 6. The central region witnessed the share of rice and wheat together at 20% over the period since 1962, thereby showing no effect of the Green Revolution at all. In fact, wheat and rice carry the same proportion in total output in the central region. As far as the southern region is concerned, where the wheat constitute negligible proportion, the wheat-rice combination witnessed decline in its share. The share of rice in the southern region declined from 29.5% during 1962-65 to 25.3% during 2003 and 6. Such cropping pattern highlights the unsustainability of such cropping pattern. B. Wide variation in region-wise agricultural performance. We have witnessed wide variations in the performance of agricultural sector across different regions in India. Once we assign major role to the agricultural sector in the well-being of population, as majority of population in India is dependent on agriculture sector, then wide variations in the agricultural performance has major implication for varying economic well-beings of people in different regions. This must be attributed to uneven implementation of policies suitable to the agriculture sector. The wide variation of the use of pump sets, tractors and fertilizers is a major concern of wide variation of agricultural performance. C. Dismal performance of agriculture during globalization. It has been highlighted that the performance of agriculture sector during the globalization period has been lower than expected by the proponent of globalization. The globalization was to offer the greater market access to the agricultural products and thereby causing spurt in the agricultural development in India. Let's discuss the future scope and challenges of agriculture for the economic development in India. International integration of domestic markets as well as the rising population in India requires faster expansion of agricultural products. International integration creates an additional source of demand for agricultural products apart from the domestic sources of demand. If India wants to grow at the rate of 8%, then it has to be accompanied by faster expansion of agriculture so that the rising demand for food by the industrial and service sector is met appropriately. As India progresses economically, the diversity of demand for agricultural products will also grow. Therefore, the agriculture sector has very important role to play in the sustenance of buoyancy in the economic performance. As per some estimate, the demand for food grains has been projected to around 325 million tons per annum by 2020, and India needs to propel the agricultural sector to achieve higher rate of growth. The biggest constraint on the expansion of agriculture sector is the irrigation facility, as in 2012 only 45% of net cropped area was irrigated. Such data on irrigated land in 2012 shows very little progress since 2003, when the net irrigated area was at 41%. This problem has to be tackled effectively to increase the land productivity as well as enhancing the cropping intensity. Now we will summarize what we have studied in detail. Role of agriculture plays an important role in the economy from demand as well as supply dimensions in the economy. From the demand side, the expansion of agriculture sectors generates demand for the products in the modern sector and helps the expansion of the modern sector. From the supply side, agriculture sector ensures the adequate supply of food grains for the workers engaged in the non-agriculture sectors. It also ensures the supply of varieties of raw materials to the industrial and the service sectors. The release of surplus laborers augments the production capacity in the modern sectors. It also helps in controlling the food inflation in a country, which is vital for stable economic growth. Cropping pattern plays important role in agriculture sector for ensuring suitable cropping for different areas to enhance the land productivity. Appropriate cropping pattern helps to overcome deficiencies in nutritional balances in the population of the country. Agriculture has also played very crucial role in making economic advances of currently developed countries. Cases of Japan, Taiwan and Denmark are few examples where the adoption of modern techniques as well as improved varieties of seeds played crucial roles in the developing the agricultural sector, with very visible change towards the crops, which causes the greater land productivity. Indian economy, which witnessed food scarcity and dependence on the foreign nations for its even basic requirements of cereals based food requirements till the mid-1960s, adopted the Green Revolution techniques to overcome such challenges. The Green Revolution techniques were primarily based on the high yielding varieties of seeds, use of fertilizers, modern technologies and suitable cropping patterns. This led to primarily greater change of cropping pattern, where the Green Revolution techniques were implemented, that was mainly in the northwestern region. Wheat and rice, particularly in Punjab, increased their share in the total agriculture output. The other regions also witnessed change in the cropping patterns, particularly after 1980, when the Green Revolution techniques were implemented little widely. But such diversification got stagnated during the period since economic liberalization, except the central region, where the share of cotton and oilseeds increased. The change in the cropping pattern and the application of the Green Revolution techniques did trigger better agricultural performance, particularly during the period between 1980 and 1992. But the post-economic liberalization has witnessed slowdown of agriculture sector. There has also been deficiency in the cropping pattern in India, as some regions have witnessed emergence of unsuitable crops, such as Punjab has witnessed rise in the share of rice in total output of crops, which is unsustainable as there is a fall in the groundwater level. Similarly, the eastern region has not witnessed rise in the share of most suitable crops such as rice, which is most suitable for the eastern region. The uneven implementation of the Green Revolution techniques has caused uneven performance of agricultural sector in the different regions. India has to strengthen its agriculture sector performance by infusing greater degree of public investments across all the regions for increasing the irrigation facilities as well as increasing the number of cold storages and warehouses. India needs to match the level of land productivity that exists in the developed countries.